Okay.
Mics are muted. Give me 1 second. This thing has a lag time even when I press.
Okay. I will call to order the Monday, March 9th meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. First item on our agenda is public comments. We have 2 public hearings on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone here to make public comment on any item that's not on our agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3A, which is GLUA 19-00052, South End Road, River Terrace Memory Care. Is there anyone here to speak on that matter? Okay. Seeing none, there's been a request for a continuance. We don't need to open the public hearing since there's no one here to speak to it. So all we need at this point is a motion to continue until
April 13th, as
April
opposed to
13th.
March 23rd, because we were going to cancel that one.
April 13th. Is that a regular meeting day? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. Moved and seconded to continue until April 13th. Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Chair Mitchell?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Moving on to item 3B, GLUA -20-0010, VAR 20-0004, fence height variance. Okay. So I get to read the script. We have a public hearing on land use application scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the commissioners whether they've had any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown in the chart over there on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city can notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimonies stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they're not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Okay, now we will open the public record for item GLUA-20-001A. And we'll start down with Commissioner Staggs. Any commissioner have any ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or site visit?
Neither one, no, I do not.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson?
Site visit, no ex parte or no conflict of interest.
Okay. Anything from your site visit that might come up later?
Well, yeah, I noticed, or I was familiar with that subdivision, and what I read in the staff report and all that, it was talking about a fence, and it showed with a dotted line as to where the fence was. Part of that fence appears to be there already.
Okay.
So we'll hear about that.
We can discuss that.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Commissioner Stoll?
No to all of the above.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
No ex parte contact, no conflict of interest, and I did visit the site.
Okay. Any contact or information from the site visit that you think might come up later?
As Commissioner Johnson mentioned, there is a portion of the back fence that's already there. And then I noticed that the houses are fed by a driveway, like a side road. A couple houses on that, almost confuses the road orientation of the house. So I wanted to chat about that during the meeting.
All right. And I have no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest. I did visit the site. And the only thing I noticed, a couple of things. First off, that tower really is ugly and does need to be screened. But there's the other side, there's a lot of fence there already. Those are the things that caught my eye. So, all right, does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners about the statements we've just made? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the staff report. Who's up? Where's my agenda?
That is me.
It's you? All right, Ms. Robertson-Gardner.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. So this is a fence height variance request. This is Lot 3 of Lindsay Ann 2. You'll see it identified in yellow. It is a larger lot because a large portion of it is underneath the PGE easement, and it was platted as such. This area is zoned R6. In this area, there are other R6 properties as well as properties that are in the county. That's kind of the gray area. And the darker kind of orange is R8 on the other side of the park. So this is a combination of kind of low-density residential area of Oregon City. Here are some site photos provided by the applicant. So it sounds like some of the fence has been put up. I just spoke with the applicant this evening, and to her understanding, it's the part that doesn't need the variance request. However, regardless, if the variance request is denied tonight, staff would work with the applicant to make sure that they only have the 6-foot fence in the area that's allowed by code, which I'll explain in a little more detail in the presentation. The first photo on your left is at the intersection of Cherrywood. You're at Cherrywood and Myrtlewood looking back towards Leland Road and the house. And then the photo to the right, you're at Leland Road looking at the house on Myrtlewood. This is a plat provided by the applicant, kind of showing the different locations, and I've kind of identified with different color arrows. First up here, we have the house location, and the crux of this variance application is because of the location of the easement, the house is required to be pushed back more than it normally would in a single-family residential subdivision kind of site plan. What you have in the house here is kind of with the green arrow. You have the proposed fence location dotted. You notice it kind of starts to the side of the house and then moves forward in front of Myrtlewood and then crosses to Cherrywood. Fortunately, this is an older plan, and so it identifies the wrong name of the street of Cedarwood, which is actually one street over. I'll show you up here. Cedarwood is right here, and this is Cherrywood. There's a lot of woods named the street, but this should say Cherrywood Way. What you have is the PG line easement, which is this line here and this line down here, the tower's approximate location, as well as the city's public utility easement, which runs 10 feet on Myrtlewood Way as well as Cherrywood Way. So those are kind of the main locational points of interest for this application. In a variance, we have variance criteria, and I'll go through each variance criteria and then look at the recommended conditions of approval. So the first variance criteria, the variance requirement is not likely to cause substantial damage to adjacent properties by reducing light, air, safe access, or other desirable or necessary qualities. So I think that one of the key findings is that the R6 zone, you're actually allowed to put your house as close as 10 feet from the property line, which means that where the applicant is proposing to put the fence, which is 10 feet, and where they could put the fence if their house was at the setback, they would not need a variance today. And it's because of, some of the portions, because they are having to push back that house to fit in that back corner of the easement. And they provided a mitigation landscaping plan that we proposed on a staff level to be recorded as a covenant. That the request is the minimum variance would alleviate the hardship. The applicant's really working to try to get a fence in front of the tower. So it's pretty close. It probably is about 3 to 5 feet in front of the tower. If it could be slightly closer to the tower, but staff felt that was reasonable for the request to provide a fence in front of the tower rather than behind the tower. Granting the variance will equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation to be modified. Well, some of the reasons why we have the fence code requirement that does not allow 6-foot fences in the front yard or within 40 feet of the front yard is to allow eyes on the street and to provide a pedestrian experience, a more friendly pedestrian experience. In this situation, and I'll go back, the proposed fence is not in front of the house, so there is a fair amount of eyes on the street opportunity, which does not have a fence. And the applicant has proposed mitigation planting along both sides with a fence set back 10 feet. So on the back of the sidewalk, there'd be a 10-foot area of landscape planting on both frontages.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you can't have a fence within 40 feet of the front of the house. Is that laterally to?
No, fences need to be 3.5 feet in front of a house. In a situation where you have, kind of think about it more of a rectangle oriented the other way.
Right.
If your house is set back much farther, and we have some county property that maybe came in and we're developing the county on larger lots, and they may be 150 feet back,
Yeah.
Or maybe 60 feet back. We have a cap at 40 feet where you can start a 6-foot fence. And the reason why is we don't want to have
40 feet away from the house or 40 feet
40 feet from the right of way.
back from the right of way? Okay, got
And
it.
the reason is why we don't want to create a compound feeling, right, where you
Right.
don't have the eyes on the street. And I think in this situation, they could have had the fence where they wanted to if they did not have the easement. And 2, they don't have the fence in front of their house. In a sense, they have a very large side lot. And because of where the house is, a lot of the side lot default becomes the front yard.
Well, now, if the house would have been rotated counterclockwise 90 degrees and the front door would have been in that alleyway, would they even need a variance?
There's 2 frontages, Cedarwood Way and Myrtlewood. That alley
Yeah.
is not a frontage legally for, the frontage is for the 2 homes, and I don't have the.
Okay, so their garage
yeah.
isn't fed from that side.
So
I think their application had a
there's
photo
2
of it.
lots, and can you all see my arrow? There's
Yeah.
a lot here and a lot here. They front Leland Road, but they have a shared driveway in the back. But
Right.
their legal frontage is, legal front yard is Leland Road.
Oh,
Okay.
So in this for this lot 3, they have 2 frontages, Cherrywood and Myrtlewood. And the same situation, if the house was flipped the other direction and the house was fronted Cherrywood, they still would have a front fence problem. Actually, probably even more of a front fence problem than they have now.
right.
So I'm gonna go back to, so any impacts resulting from the adjustment are mitigated. So we really felt, they've kind of met the eyes on the street feeling, making sure that the fence didn't become 6 feet till it was clearly visually a side yard, but we are proposing the requirement of a covenant to be placed on the property to require that the mitigation plantings on both myrtlewood and cherrywood require the property owner, if they're diseased or dying, they have to be replaced over time to make sure that that runs with the land. So it's not in a situation where they look good today, but in 9 years from now, they could all be diseased or dying and then they aren't replaced. So that the idea is that as long as a 6-foot fence is there in the place requiring the variance, they need to have the mitigation planting. And finally, no practical alternatives identified. Not granting the variance would require the applicant to place a 6-foot fence at the rear of the tower, kind of meeting the threshold of anything to the side of the house. So it would just have that kind of open area with the tower, and it would not require any landscape planting. So you could just have the open grassy area with the tower, and then the fence behind the tower would not require variance, and that's an as-right. There's no requirement to landscape that part of their lot. And the staff believes the variance conforms to, we identified some comprehensive plan policies, and I think the two ones I really saw was provide for increased livability for the property owners and effectively utilize their single-family property. So not allowing the fence really reduces the ability to utilize that lot. The conditions of approval I've pasted here, but mainly it's confirmed with Portland General Electric that what's proposed is allowed. The applicant has done that, but they'll provide a written comment to us. The condition number 2 is to make sure that the 6-foot fence this is not put in the public utility easement, and that the shrubs are planted and a covenant is recorded. As always, call to make sure before you dig anywhere. And so, because this is a public utility easement in front, there could be private utilities such as gas or cable. So always remind everybody to call before you dig as a public service announcement. So I'm available to answer any questions. I'll go back to the map, which is probably where people will, and I know the applicant is available to speak this evening as well.
Any questions for staff at this point? All right. We'll hear from the applicant, and I've got up to 15 minutes for your presentation. And please introduce yourself and your name and your city of residence.
Wendy, you gotta sit down.
Take a seat. Yep. Got to get you on the microphone and the video.
Okay, my name is Wendy Forrester. I am the contractor. My company is S&W Construction, and I am the applicant.
And my name is Tessa Potter, and I am the property owner. My family recently moved into the home.
Okay. Tessa, is this your card?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can read the handwriting.
Okay. We'll have to get your name on there.
Oh, oops.
Okay. All right. Please go ahead.
What would you like to know? Basically, we came up with that. I did put the fence in. Part of that was as to be able to get their loan, they needed to know that things were proceeding the way that, the back fence was, there was nothing to do with the back fence. I did come down the side on it, but did nothing across at the front, right up near the house. We kind of went across there, but that's where that would legally, we're behind the front of the house. So I knew we could do that, but I was just waiting until everything was cleared before I did anything more, one way or the other. But have my landscapers, everyone's kind of on hold to get it taken care of. It's like 650 feet of fence. It's a lot of fence. A lot of fence.
So I have a question for you. The fence that's there now basically goes from the point of that blue arrow over to the house.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And then it's also on it's
Cherrywood.
not cedarwood, it's
Yep,
cherrywood.
cherrywood, yes.
Okay, that one's also built.
Yep, but nothing across the front or back to that blue arrow.
Okay.
And that was, like I said, just.
No fence across the whole back? You've got enough fence?
No, the fence across the whole back, yes, but that is not something that would be in any question. 6 foot is allowed back there.
Okay.
And that's why, because of them needing, a lot of times loan companies won't loan on something, and they had sold their house, they needed to move, and it was kind of, let's get the back in so that, lines are drawn.
And if I could speak about, when you guys were talking about the reasons for and against doing this, one thing that wasn't brought up was a liability and security reason. I would hate, like, we own that whole property, me and my husband do, and I would hate for someone to not be aware that it isn't like public land. You know, if it's not fenced, it's easy for someone to wander on and maybe climb the power tower, which they're not supposed to do. But if it's behind a fence, it's a lot harder for someone to do that. And I that is another one of our concerns, is that it makes it one step harder for someone to not be thinking about what they're doing and potentially get hurt on our property, and then we'd be liable for that.
Do you have any questions?
Okay, you have nothing else unless we have questions?
Yeah, it's pretty much,
straightforward?
it's a pretty straightforward. We just want to kind of hide the tower and give them a yard.
Any questions for the applicant?
Nope.
Okay. I've got one question. I think it might be more for staff.
Sure.
I think it was the second criteria for approval that the fence can't be in the 10-foot right of way. Mm-hmm. Is that Public Works? That's them saying you can't do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They want to be able to, if they need to access it, they don't want a fence in the middle of it.
Okay. What I was really hoping, I'm trying to reduce the kind of prison wall effect of that, and hoping that we could have broken it into sections and put part of it 9 feet back and part of it 11 feet back, you know, get at least a little bit of a stagger to it so that it's not
Well, you
just,
could put it 10 feet back and 11 feet back.
yeah, then we're going, I mean, it's taking up more of their property. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to go there unless the other commissioners want to go there.
One thing I wanted to ask, can you go back one
Sure.
photo to the streets? Okay, where is 10 feet?
Oh, good question.
Just on the other side of the...
Backside of
No, well, you can kind of see some flags that are kind of in the front
The pink
on that
ones?
picture right there. See, there's some flags. See that, where her arrow is? 10 feet is behind that. No, back. See where her arrow is?
Yeah.
That's about
The
10 feet
arrow
back.
only shows up here. It shows
Oh,
up
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But it's, 10 feet is a fair amount of space. It's not
Behind the sidewalk.
behind the sidewalk.
How
Yes.
10
how
feet
far is
behind
the
the
tower from the sidewalk?
Okay, the tower, I don't have an exact measurement, but what I figured is we're about between 5 and 6 feet at that point where the point of the tower and that fence. It's
Okay.
a little better than it's about 5 to 6 feet. And that's just from when I actually measured different things, because I had them come and mark where the PUE, all the different utilities are. So there's little flags, you can see them there, and we have to be behind that.
I didn't realize it was that far back in. I thought it was from the curb.
No, it's all the way from the sidewalk. It's back a long ways.
Okay.
Can you get back to the photo again?
Sure can.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to stare at it for a second.
One question possibly.
Yes, sir.
PGE, meeting their requirements. Do they have a lot of
No.
things or?
They didn't care about anything other than they wanted to know if it was a metal fence. I said no. I said it's wood. They said wood doesn't matter. Metal, then you have to ground it properly. They said you can't plant trees under the power lines that will grow taller than 15 feet. And because it is a tower, they wanted a 12-foot gate to be able to access it sometime in a life expectancy if none of us will be here. But so there is a 12-foot gate that will be there.
And
It's on the side. It's over on Cherrywood.
It comes off Cherrywood.
It's on Cherrywood, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Cherrywood is a street that may or may not ever go through, but yes.
Is there a curb cut on Cherrywood?
There is not, but there was an allowance for a curb cut there.
Oh.
It was not put there because we used myrtlewood instead. But yes, there was, it had 2 accesses to the property to begin with.
Gotcha.
Presumably this can never be subdivided or
No.
nothing could ever happen in the future on this property.
Nope, because of the easement, where the house is about the only buildable area on the lot.
Yeah.
Any other questions from commissioners?
I have one more question.
Sure.
So the fence is not required
Nope,
by the city.
nope.
I guess the question I have for the applicant is can you just describe exactly why you want to put a fence there, other than, I heard you talk about the, security with the tower. Is it more to have a private yard area?
Well, they paid, it's their yard.
Yeah.
They paid for it.
Yep.
And they have children, so they want, and a pet, so
Sure.
keeping your pet inside is an important thing, and
Yes, I understand.
all of those things.
Yeah.
It's not just to have a fence there.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and it's to cover up some of the effects of the tower. You have a lovely wooden fence there. You have some nice shrubs there. It's a much better thing to look at than a tower that you're walking
Yeah.
by every day.
The other part is, as Christina said, legally, if we put the fence back so that it's back behind the tower, all that property in front, they really don't have to maintain other than maybe once a year or twice a year go and mow it down, which then, in my opinion, is an eyesore more than really what we're proposing to do. It's got twofold. It's for their kids, for their pets, and it's also something to make it look nicer and make the property more valuable.
Is there a height requirement for the fence? Could it be-
Anything in front of the house can only be 3.5 feet tall.
Right.
Anything to the side or the rear of the house can be 6 foot tall. And so where the tower is, it kind of straddles right where the house is. So basically you would have to wait, you would have to put it kind of the back of the tower. I can go back to the map. There we go. So if this is the house,
Yeah.
this is the line, they can put the 6 foot fence kind of the back of the tower
Without a variance, right?
without the variance.
The fence could be any height. It could be 2 feet tall, 4 feet
In
tall.
front
whatever.
of the house, so it can be
In front
anything
of the house.
up to
Right.
3.5 feet, but no more.
I mean, one consideration is you could just do a small. I understand the thought about the tower and trying to kind of mitigate the visual impact of the tower, but the reality is it's a huge tower. It's never going to go away. You're
No.
going to see it, always going to see it. And a 6 foot fence probably is not going to have a big effect on how it looks visually in the neighborhood. What I was going to say is you could actually do a smaller fence. It would be less expensive to build it.
A 3.5 foot fence, the issue would be, they have boys. I had 5 boys, and I have news for you, a 3.5 foot fence wouldn't do a thing.
We also have a husky, a 60-pound husky, who
Okay.
would loop right over that fence.
Yeah.
So that was another consideration is like, yeah, we could do a fence behind the tower, but then we have a husky that then can't access any of that area or our kids without us being, out there really present with them. Or B, we just wouldn't be able to utilize that property the way we want to. We intend to have, a garden and flowers, and we want to have as much of the property as possible. It's part of the reason we bought the bigger lot.
The other related thing I would just say is that going back to the concerns earlier about this, this really long fence, right? And, we do have street trees there, so that kind of visually breaks up the fence. And with this addition of this 10-foot landscaped area, that will further break up the visual impact of the fence. Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of street trees along there.
Yeah, my husband's looking forward to mowing between all those.
More of a comment. I like the way you've, with the fence as proposed here by the house. The house is squeezed into the corner of that
Yes.
2,900 square foot, or it's a large lot. By putting the fence across, the horizontal fence across right behind the side of the house, it probably gives you a better view from the drive-in to the car. It's normal that you see side spaces on both sides of the house, setbacks.
Actually, that fence that comes from the house out right now, what's there is about 45 feet.
But
And then the other side, because of setbacks, is only 5 feet
Right.
on the other side. So it's basically just got the gate there and then the fence that runs kind of along that little alleyway that feeds the other two places.
But it isn't an equal setback, but I think it'll give you a visual effect of, hey, this is the front yard over to this side fence.
Yep.
And you may have people coming in and out for years or driving by it and never realize, hey, this is
All one.
All
In
one.
fact, nobody really did know that until I put the fence across the back.
We didn't know that when we first looked at the house until the realtor came and said, no, this lot goes all the way down to the curb. And then that was a selling point for us.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Not really a question, just an observation on the photo. Can you go back to the photo, the street view? The photo on the right, if you look underneath the Leland sign, you'll see on the left side, there's some houses. There are other fences along the street. It's
Yes,
not
they
gonna
are.
be the
They're
only
1
one.
foot back.
They're 1 foot back.
And that's what
So-
all subdivisions do.
Now, what are those? Those aren't front yards, or those are,
That would be their side yard. And
Yeah,
side yards
but
are
because
allowed
it's-
to have 6-foot fences.
right, so, but because it's a side yard, you end up with fences on the street anyway.
Yeah.
So if it was the only one, I would say, yeah, okay, you're gonna have the one on fence, but clearly there's other fences. This one's longer, not your fault. That's just how long the lot is, but there's other examples of fences that look like that. And this one's gonna be further back, right?
Yeah, way back.
Yeah.
The others are
10
only
feet
a
instead
foot.
of 1 foot.
Okay. All right.
Anything else? Okay, thank you both. If you could put your name on that one,
Yes, sir.
and then go ahead and give both of them back to Christina. Okay, I don't see anyone else present to comment on this. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Deliberation, comment, question, anything from any of the commissioners? Or if we're ready to move to a motion? Anybody have anything?
I like it. Sort of.
One thing I did mean to say is, in the material that we got, the executive board, the neighborhood association was not able to meet, their executive board did, and they had no objection to the fence. So,
And I did have, just so you know, I did
so you
have,
can't,
I can't talk.
well, you can, if you have to come back, and sit down so we can hear you if you want to. You can, but you have to come back up and sit so you get on the
Just
record.
real quick. I did post on all the houses within 300 feet a notice. I talked to multiple neighbors, they had no problem with it. I did have a meeting. 2 people came that actually live in Lindsay Ann, which is the subdivision next to it. This is Lindsay Ann too. And they had no objections.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So,
All right, then do we have a motion?
Move to approve GLUA. I keep changing the screen. 20-0010 with conditions.
I'll second that.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Call
Commissioner
the roll.
Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Chair Mitchell?
Aye,
Motion carries.
thank you.
All right.
Okay, moving on to item number 4, review of the comprehensive plan. Get your popcorn, right?
All right. One moment.
So just to be clear, if the corner of my house is more than 40 feet from the property line, I can build a 6-foot fence in front of the house. Is that
Yes,
correct?
so if your property is 100 feet back and your house is way at the very back of it, we don't
Right.
want to penalize you for
Okay.
that. And so 40 feet back from the street, you can start your 6-foot fence.
Get out the tape
It's a
measure.
rare
40
case.
feet back from
The public right away,
the right of way. Yeah.
Right away.
from the front. And that's in chapter 1754, 100 of our code.
It's gonna be close to 40 feet.
But give us a call, 503-722-3789. We can help you.
I've got
Or
your
stop
email
by
address.
Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 3:30. Okay, so a couple different things I wanted to
That's a great
chat
picture.
about
Yeah,
the
it is.
comprehensive
Are we
plan.
looking at Westland or are we looking at Oregon City? Can't tell.
I think it's,
Westland.
I think it is.
Yeah.
So for the comprehensive plan, it's a basic guideline for the city. We know that we're going to update our comprehensive plan, so I wanted to chat a little bit about our existing comprehensive plan so that we got more comfortable with what a comprehensive plan is, and then I'll eventually tell you about the project as well. On your dais, you have a summary of our 19 statewide land use goals. These are very important. There's other regulations that apply. We'll chat about it, but this is to keep should you want it. So if you were to think about your vision for the future of Oregon City, what does it look like? How do we approach historic preservation? How do we approach stream protection? How do we approach growth, annexation? What about houses? If you want to live in Oregon City, is there a place for you? Is there a place you can afford? If there are that many places, then what does traffic look like? So comprehensive plans are a singular vision that balance all of that. It helps us prepare for the future and for change. We know that the change is inevitable, so we want to make sure that we are well prepared for it. And that relates to both population and employment. Also, comprehensive plans provide a guide for us to, when we do land use decision making, as you all know, when we have comprehensive plan amendments or zone changes, master plans, they always want us to go back and look at the comp plan. And it also helps us figure out how we have infrastructure in place for growth when it comes. So how much infrastructure do we need? How big do the pipes need to be? And then do we have programs to implement that? So comprehensive plan normally has a lot of ancillary documents. So your stormwater master plan, your transportation system plan, Parks and Rec master plan, you name it, there's a lot of master plans that get combined as ancillary to our comprehensive plan. So big picture vision, and we want one vision, because whenever you were thinking of answers to the questions at the beginning of this, they're probably not the same answers that the person next to you was. So it's important to us that we create a single vision that the commission can then implement. And we want that single vision to be the vision of everyone in Oregon City. So our main goal in this project is we talk to as many people as possible, because if there are concerns or different priorities for people and we don't ask them, then we don't know, and we can't help protect them or better serve them. We want to make sure that we serve all of our community members. So comprehensive plan, there's some regulations that have to do. We want to make sure that we are implementing federal, state, metro requirements, these statewide land use goals. So generally, there's some flexibility when you implement those. And so the comprehensive plan is our approach to it. So like for stream protection, we discourage building in the stream, but you still can. You don't have to, but that's where the city wanted to balance stream protection and development and property rights and things like that. So when we do our comprehensive plan update, we'll have more of a higher priority on how do we balance competing interests, housing and transportation, job growth and transportation, you name the thing, stream protection, tree preservation and development. So it's our local lens on higher priorities. We implement, again, the comp plan through all of these subsidiary plans, but we also use it to, when we create our budget and our goals for the city, we do a budget and goals every 2 years. And so if the comp plan says, like, do this big project, then we know to put it on the list for the commission to consider for the biennium budgets. So it does relate to things that you might not think it would relate to, like police services or library services, in addition to parks. Our comprehensive plan was created in 2004. We want to update it because we've changed a lot since 2004. Our population has changed a little bit. Also, technology and things have changed a little bit. When we talk about how we engage with the community, social media didn't exist as much back then in the way that it does now, or it wasn't used, I would say, to the extent that it is now. Willamette Falls Legacy Project wasn't even a thing back then, so things have changed. This comprehensive plan has statements of principle in the beginning of the document. They are like the core values. So all of the goals and policies need to abide by these statements of principle, and they're pretty general. Promote sustainability, contain urban development. You'll hear a lot about when we go through in a few minutes. A priority of the comprehensive plan is to not make Oregon City as big as it can be. It's to be smart with infrastructure and efficient with infrastructure by supporting as much density as we can so we don't keep getting bigger. So we either get denser or bigger. So in this comprehensive plan, it's more leaning towards using your services efficiently and putting density in the right place along transit corridors and things like that. Not that every single-family neighborhood can exist anymore. It's just figuring out how to allocate those and spread them so that people have a good sense of place. And economic vitality is part of it. Certainly that jobs component. How do we support businesses and jobs in Oregon City? So with all these statements and principles, we have this comprehensive plan. This is the double-sided version of the comprehensive plan, but we have goals and policies that implement this vision. Does anyone want to take a guess at how many goals and policies we have in our comprehensive plan?
19.
Ballpark?
43.
1943, okay, you must be talking about goals. We have more policies. We have 65 goals and 291 policies. So our existing comprehensive plan has goals and policies at various levels. Some are really high level, some are very specific. Some say like follow the law, which may or may not really have to be a goal or policy, because we should do that anyway. So they're all over the place. With our new comprehensive plan, there's two things. One is we're going to start with a community vision, which is similar to those principles. We want to make sure that we understand where we're going before we create the plan. But two, we want this document to be used. And it's really challenging for us to expect the public will pick this up and read it when there's 65 goals and 291 policies. I mean, that alone is...
Or the planning commission to pick it up and read it.
What we want is a document that can be easily understood and used. We may use a comprehensive plan more, or maybe the public will use a comprehensive plan more if they can understand it better. And right now it's formatted off the state land use goals at the time. And so it's very legalese in some sense. And so that's what we want to get away with the update. But let me tell you a little bit more about our existing.
Did it grow from 2004, or was it 65 goals and 291 policies in 2004?
It was 65 goals and 291
Okay.
policies in 2004.
Okay.
And we had one in 1980 before that. So that was our duration, 1980, 2004, and now today. But I think the way that people do comprehensive plans has changed. Planning in general is a newer field. We want to make sure we get everything in here. And it'd be curious to know how that's working out for us. And if we know everything in here, because we just maybe overpacked. So there's chapters, there's a summary of what the chapters are. They range from citizen involvement to environmental protection and so forth. I wanted to go through each of them real quick. I picked out one policy to highlight randomly. But you can see the topics through each of them. So they're separated by sections, which are really mimicking statewide goals. So the first one is citizen involvement. In generally, it talks about making sure that citizens have a place in planning and that they can participate in long range. We tell them that we're doing other planning and so forth. So this one is notify citizens about opportunities when they occur. And that's one of the 13 policies and 8 goals in the first section. Section 2 is land use. This is a bigger chapter because it's talking about how we approach neighborhood livability, density. When we look at annexations, we usually look at that. Goal 2.4, neighborhood livability. You'll see that in pretty much every conditional use application that you'll see. It talks about having nodes of development, serving areas of the city that may be underserved. If there's a neighborhood with no corner grocery store around, encourage that to happen. So that's where you see like the concept plans had these little nodes out on South End Road and things like that. It tells us to focus density on corridors near transit lines, which we do. So we have the Malala 7th Avenue spine of mixed-use development and so forth. So this policy is saying we need to comply with the Metro's 2040 growth concept, which identifies our bottom shelf essentially as a regional center, which means that it should serve not just Oregon City, but those neighboring communities around us when it develops. And as you know, there's a lot of some industrial uses down there that maybe don't seem very downtown-ish, you know, from 10th to the Cove in that span. Some of it's not the most urban and not the tallest buildings. There's some storage, boat storage, things like that. So that's where it would go in the future. When we do concept plans, one thing to note is that they're based off what the community wants for the future, and they also have to be based in some type of fact. So this is the comp plan, but there's actually a giant appendix behind it with like our housing needs analysis and our economic studies and that kind of stuff. So we need to make sure that when we make decisions that they're grounded in some type of reality. But we do have leeway to implement and grow how we see fit. Section 3 is on protection of agricultural lands that only applies outside urban growth boundaries. So Section 3 is a page. We probably don't even need that page. Same with Section 4, which is forest lands. It's for protection of forest lands, how you should manage forests and harvesting and things like that. Section 5 is a big one. You'll hear it referenced fairly often because it has to do with, you'll hear the big topics of historic preservation and also natural resource protection. But those are together in the same chapter, and so you hear them quite often. It talks about, so here's a policy which is to conserve open space along creeks, urban drainage ways, steep hillsides, and throughout Knoll Creek Canyon. So that's a general policy. It gets implemented by our code. So the code implements this by having a geologic hazards overlay, which reduces development in steep areas. The natural resource overlay district, which discourages development near streams. And then also through our Woodland River Greenway as well. So we'll take this one policy and its implementing factor is the code. That's the thing that's interesting about these is that it's a comprehensive plan is a planning tool, but the implementing mechanism is not always a planning tool. You'll see later, there's one on libraries, right? We don't control that, but we want to make sure that we coordinate with other departments in Oregon City and agencies outside Oregon City to show that we are implementing this vision. I was at the high school last week talking to some seniors about the comp plan, and I said, it's like if you identify that you want to be a doctor when you're older. When you're in high school, you know you want to study and go to class to get good grades so you can realize that vision. A comp plan is very similar. We want to figure out where we want to go and then find which steps we need to do to implement that vision. Section 6 is about air quality, water quality. So in this case, the policy is to prevent erosion. Some of this, it might be state law, so I don't know that we need to create policies for each of these. Other requirements in this chapter talk about night lights, so we don't light up the sky with lighting. We implement that through our site plan design review lighting standards and things like that. Chapter 7 is natural hazards. We have a natural hazard mitigation plan the city adopts, so there's references to that. And really, this is just saying that we should prohibit development in areas of known or potential hazards. Again, Geologic Hazards Code implements that. We're almost through. Section 8, Parks and Rec. So not traditional planning, as you would think. It talks about references to our Parks Master Plan. Parks Master Plan itself has a lot of work involved in about where parks should be and how we should serve the community with parks. So what you'll see from the comp plan is that there's all these ancillary plans that go into this vision in a lot more greater detail than the comp plan itself will. So this is just saying, basically implement the Parks and Rec plan, and it's important to make sure that we have parks throughout our community.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
As the code implements the plan, how is the code, what is the protocol and methods for the code to be developed?
So for the parks one, I would say the mechanism that implements some of these, there'd be two. So when code gets developed, we'll have to do an analysis to show how it complies with this comprehensive plan. There is no mechanism to say that we're coming up on one for affordable housing, to say that we will ever meet our affordable housing goal. We'll do our best to set up scenarios so that people can reach it. But since we don't, it would be up to economic development and for the city to say that, hey, we want to build our own housing. From the tools that we use, it would be like, can you do SDC credits to support housing when it's affordable? Can we zone places so that they have different types of housing that is affordable? So it depends what the tool is. So for parks, it would be related back to, has the city been, there's comp plan policies, are we acquiring property for future parks? Are we looking at when there's property for sale next to existing parks to see if we can expand those parks? Those types of things. So there's a lot of hammers or mechanisms to implement this. Hammer's not the right word. There's a lot of strategies to implement this that are not zoning. Economic development, that's a pretty major chapter as well. This policy is very specific. Encourage private development of a hotel, bed and breakfast, restaurant facilities, and visitor services. It's probably a very good answer to your question, which is we're just zoning, and if if it's a priority for the city, economic development can try and go seek out developers, but the city only has so many tools in our toolbox to use. Economic development, there's a lot in here about encouraging home-based businesses because that's better for the transportation system and to keep jobs in Oregon City. And there's sections on tourism as well and how that relates to our future as in the city. So it's rather broad. Housing, the only two goals, but the policies all relate to making sure there is enough housing. So if you want to live in Oregon City, you can, and making sure that we have a variety of housing, of which some is affordable. So housing affordability and supply.
How's affordable defined?
We don't have a definition. There's state definitions for what affordable is based off the average median income. But the policies are broader than that. They just say affordable housing and sort of leave it at that. Since we know what affordable is always changes. So this one is a policy that we should maintain existing residential housing stock and establish in older neighborhoods by so if you were to get a comprehensive plan policy to upzone a large piece of property, this is one you would want to consider. Does it make sense? Is there housing there that is affordable that we should keep rather than change the zoning designation? I think this would apply specifically if you wanted to make some downzone something. So say it was R3.5 and you wanted to make it R10, so you wanted to get less housing units, then this would be a good policy we would take a look at. Public facilities, there's a lot here as well, but essentially it's looking at, can we create street infrastructure to support growth and change. And there's an emphasis on bike and pedestrian facilities. Not that everyone is going to ride their bike and walk on the sidewalks, but for those who can't afford cars or want to, is there a place where they can safely do it? So can we facilitate a safe environment for them? A lot of these requirements talk about providing a safe and reliable infrastructure system as it relates to sewer, water, stormwater, and so forth as well. You'll see there's sections in there on police and fire and civic facilities. So what should we do for City Hall, that kind of thing. Transportation, the policy is to support Green Street construction practices. So you can see some of these policies actually get implement multiple things. There's other goals that talk about sustainability. Here, there's a policy for Green Street practices. Again, thinking about these different policies, some are high level, some are way too high level, and some are very, very, very specific. In transportation, again, we're looking at, can we have the right capacity to meet our transportation needs? So it talks about the need for a transportation system plan that forecasts ahead for the future and accommodates projected growth, making sure it's safe and that it's efficient system so that we have the right amount of roads and that the roads are connected to each other and to other systems of traveling. Energy conservation, so create nodes in your neighborhood so that people don't have to travel very far. 14 is urbanization. So we have a lot of annexation applications over the years, so we certainly look at section 14 for that. But do we have an order in which we want annexation to occur? Do we have priority of making sure we fill out before we do annexations? Those are the types of policies that you would see in the comprehensive plan. In this case, it's talking about maximizing public investment in existing public facilities and services by encouraging redevelopment as appropriate, as opposed to going out. And then the last one is the Willamette River Greenway, which is talking about protecting views to the river. This policy restricts new substations and power line towers in the Willamette River Greenway and Riverview Corridor. We don't actually have a Riverview Corridor, but restricting substations is a very specific thing to be in a comprehensive plan. So our goal with the new comprehensive plan is that we create a community vision on how we want to grow in the future, and that will help the commission know how to make these hard policy calls based on what the community members want. And so we're going to start with this community vision, which will be similar to those policies we were talking about at the beginning. So where do we want to go? And then we'll update the comprehensive plan accordingly. Some comprehensive plan formats that are maybe somewhat similar to what we're going for. Sherwood and Milwaukee have recently updated their comprehensive plan, and they're written from the perspective of a citizen. So in our comprehensive plan update, rather than the 15 chapters, there's going to be an intro chapter, but then there will be 4. So they'll be mixing all of these items together. Thriving and diverse economy is one. Community culture and heritage is one. So we're kind of mixing topics from the state land use perspective, from a perspective from the citizen of what you would want to see, and so it makes sense. If we make it complicated to read and follow, nobody will read and follow it. So simplification is key. This process will last about 1.5 years. We're in the process of getting a consultant on board, but we've already started some public engagement as to what people want for the future. The high school students are designing a logo for us. So we're purchasing their art, one of two graphic design classes. So we should have that by the end of this week or next. And then we will be off and running. It's going to be a long process. We'll need a lot of tools. We'll have consultants who do this for a living that will be able to explain complicated processes probably better than I, and then also create forms and games and tools where you can go out to your neighbors, neighborhood associations can go out to their members and ask them what they want to see for the future of Oregon City. My fear is if I were to just show up in people's Facebook and doorway asking them what they want for the future of Oregon City, that they're not willing to have open and honest conversations with the government as they would with your family members, your neighbors, and your friends. And so in this case, we are heavily relying on citizens and our volunteers to yet again ask you to help us make sure that we create a plan that protects us all and supports all of us. There's a quote on here, and it's a little bit long, but I just kind of want to read it. It's from our existing comprehensive plan, and it says, "The City Commission firmly believes that the plan is necessary to protect and maintain the quality of life and social and economic vitality of the community. The City Commission understands that good planning is necessary to ensure that land resources are thoughtfully and efficiently used, that public services are cost-effective and adequate, that natural and historic resources that help define the city's character are protected and preserved, and that the citizens will have continuing influence on the ongoing decisions about growth and development of their community." That's a lot of sentence and a long sentence, and that's what we're trying to balance. And I think what we need is to provide a clear pathway for you in the future when you're reviewing development applications to know which goals and policies are applicable, maybe not have more than 300 of them, and clear guidance to the public as to what our opinion is on growth, historic preservation, stream protection, and change, so that we can set out goals and policies. And we may not build them all ourselves, but at least we can have some effort to show the public what we expect, or the developers as well. Questions?
You said a year and a half, that's from community vision all the way to an approved final product?
Yeah, and year and a half, 2 years. It's hard to know how long it takes to get, if there's something that comes up, we want to make sure that we are reactive to it. Like in the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan implementation, the question of how many lanes came up a bunch. So we kind of paused and did a side project to see if we should change the number of lanes. And it ended up making a better project that was more responsive to the community, but it took maybe slightly longer because of that. And so in this case, we are going to, over the next 6 to 9 months, we'll have more of a schedule once we have our consultant, which is soon, to do the most of our public engagement. So that's where we'll be asking these really broad questions. We're going to maybe have people rank different priorities. What's more important? Less cars, more housing, different types of things like that. And then we will collect all that, put them together, and then create a community vision out of that. We'll have an advisory team that's kind of be a large committee. We're thinking quite large, and they will be in charge the whole time. But not all the products are going to come out of the advisory committee because, again, our goal is to get people to participate, and the only way we do that is by having lots of ways to participate and not having one body in control of it. They will be in control, but we will, when we do our comprehensive plan chapters, so we'll have a series of summits on each of the chapters. And at the summits, there's no committee that is appointed to talk about that chapter, because that's the opposite of what we want. We want people to come to meetings when they're interested in the topic and not feel embarrassed to participate or feeling like they have to sit at around a table and they don't want to talk. We want to have a mechanism where we go to the public to seek input. We take that input, create a vision, and then with that vision, we update these chapters in a way that is easy to understand. So public involvement is key on this. Again, we don't, that's our most important part, is that we do a genuinely good job finding people who are underrepresented, who maybe don't participate in government activity. They may not speak English. So it takes time and effort to make sure that we meet people where they're at.
How do you decide who the consultant is?
We just did an RFP, so we have 2 consultants, and we will do a notice of intent to award in the next day or 2. So we had 2 applications to help us do the public involvement plan, create the tools to implement the public involvement plan, as well as do an update to our housing needs analysis and little economic study as well. There's not that many shops in town, so we tend to see sort of the same people apply for these. So the funding got really complicated because we didn't have any money, but we wanted to do a big project. So we have the RFP for this first part, and then we will go through a separate procurement process to finish off the project, which will be about a $150,000 thing that's primarily funded by ODOT with some city funds too. Bob LaSalle, from the chair of our CIC, is helping us go through these consultants for this part of the project.
Are the 2 candidate firms, are they local? Can you tell us who they are?
3J and Angelo.
3J and Angelo? Okay.
Yep. But both great applications, actually.
Yeah.
So we're in good hands.
Yeah, I kind of partially asked the question because to have this sort of vision for the future of the city. Yeah, it's a big decision.
It is. In the scope of work for the public involvement plan, we have that they have to go to the CIC before it's finalized. So the CIC does get to have some input on how the community involvement plan is going to happen. Because again, we want to make sure that we don't just hold an open house and have a meeting here that people don't come to. So if you have any ideas, let us know.
Will we have an opportunity to see that plan? Have you input on that plan before it's finalized?
No, you will not. But during the whole process, we have actually curated a process where you're paired with the city commission the whole time. So at the touch points through the project, when we have draft community visions, and then once that draft is finalized, there's joint work sessions between the planning commission and city commission. So we're treating, for all intents and purposes, we're treating you the same as the city commission. Every time we have touch points with them, it's a joint work session with you guys as well. So before all the major milestones, when we get feedback from these groups and create a draft vision, before we go public with the draft vision to get their input, it'll come to you guys through that joint work session. So you will have a lot of opportunity to help drive the process as we're going through it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other than the, you mentioned the housing needs analysis and there was an economic
Study.
study piece. So updating those 2 items that are in the appendixes is part of this, but the rest, the TSP and the Parks Master Plan and all that, okay, they're referred to in the comp plan, but they're not being updated as a part of this process.
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing that's related is we did hear the community identify that they would like a new wetland inventory. So this has been a couple years, we've been hearing a request for a new citywide wetland inventory. So something like that may show up in the comprehensive plan, that the community, as maybe that's the policy, is to update the wetland inventory or something like that.
So are you saying that this comprehensive plan is going to focus on those 2 things?
We technically need the factual basis to update the comprehensive plan. We also need to update our housing needs analysis. We did a draft housing needs analysis with the county this past year, but we never this is the avenue in which we're taking that draft work and asking the public if it's right. Are all our assumptions correct or not? The timing was, well, it was free, so it was a really great project. It saved the city a lot of money, actually, $20,000 to be precise. But also, it put us in a place where we did a countywide housing inventory, and so we could see how the county and the cities all work together. That happened right at the adoption of the code amendments, or right before the adoption of the code amendments. And so what that meant is it didn't properly account for all of our code amendments and how that would change our assumptions or not. And so we want to go through this public vetting process to make sure whatever assumptions we have are correct. I think in that housing needs analysis, some questions, some philosophical questions would be like, how much would we assume our mixed-use zones can accommodate apartments or housing? How much of that will be housing? How much, if we allow corner duplexes, does that play into the numbers? At what rate or percentage does that affect what we think our future availability will have? But for technical analysis, it's just those two, which we need anyway, but we need the economic study because otherwise we have no factual basis to update it. And the economic study is going to talk about what are our major employments, what are the trends around here, are there things that we should be paying attention to or not? It's a higher level study. And then on a separate note, there's an economic strategy that our economic development department will be doing. And so we'll be working with them on this project and that as well. And it might be coming parallel to this, but it would further refine how we approach jobs. Did I make more clarity or more murky? Any questions? I think the topics are broad. There's a wide range of them. Our consultant will help ask the general questions, and you'll see the general questions of not how do you want us to approach stream protection, but it will be more like how do you prioritize this thing over that thing? Do you think we should grow more dense before we grow out? Mm-hmm. What are our community's expectations for the future of Oregon City? Do people assume we will change?
Mm-hmm. That one question you just asked is a really important one. Growing denser or growing more horizontally outwards. Yeah. There's some, I'll call it best practices planning strategies that have been very successful in many places that I think would help us answer that question.
Yeah. And then how will the legacy project change things? How will the 205 expansion project change? I mean, how will all of these other things influence what we are when we grow up? Mm-hmm. Our historic districts. Should we have more?
Yeah.
I'll just throw out a wish that when you're looking at this, choosing people for the consultant to do the public involvement plan, mm-hmm. I'd love to see something a little more creative than, mm-hmm. rank these 5 things. I've seen some pretty interesting stuff like, they'll ask a question, they say, so there's a slider on the page and it says, you got $100. How would you spend that on a wider street or a sidewalk or a bus lane or whatever? Spend your $100 so that it isn't just, we've got to try to make it interesting and fun to try to get more than the usual suspects filling the thing out. Because otherwise, that's all it'll be.
Yep, agreed. And having graphics, I think, are helpful in that. We're just not equipped to do that as much in-house.
Right. Along the same lines, having a consultant that will challenge us and help us think about things differently. And help us see things that we haven't seen because we're so close to everything. We're all like right here. A broader perspective, here's how they did it in this other place that was really successful, and it's not something we normally think about. Could be a really big
Good point.
change for us that would be good for us. Like maybe they did it in some other city in the Midwest that, I think a firm that has the ability to kind of challenge us and make us think about things we don't normally think about would be good too. Yeah.
Good point.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Laura. Any other communication items?
Oh, the other one is that our next meeting on March 23rd, we'll be canceling it. It happens to be spring break, and we don't have a packed agenda anyway, so you guys get the night off.
And that's already on the Planning Commission website, right?
Yes, it's already posted online as well.
Okay. That's it?
That's it.
So you're gonna do all of this stuff, new stuff, and creative and interesting, but you're still gonna have to do the regular job as a multitasking.
That's correct. We'll still process applications as they come in, so let's hope it slows down just a touch. I guess we do have the other big news is that last night at 9 p.m., Kelly had a baby girl.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Great.
Yeah,
no, her first was a
cool.
boy.
second. Yeah.
Very cool.
That's great.
So you'll let us know that there's some discussion about our April meetings, right?
Yes, so we'll have the first one in April. Yeah, but the March ones, the second March one should be canceled, yeah.
Okay. You sent me an email about, we'll need to loop back, because you sent me an email about changing one April meeting.
I'm gonna be gone, but you'll still have a meeting.
Okay.
They're letting me go on vacation.
Oh, wonderful. Good for you.
Where you going?
You had,
Hawaii.
Oh, it's
Oh, beautiful.
you had vacation last year too, didn't you?
No. I think I did, I don't know.
Okay, anything else from any of the commissioners? Okay, thank you all, we're adjourned.